He raised her with love, but she only saw him as a wallet. Until one day the truth shattered everything. For years, Richard sat in the same worn leather chair by the window, his phone resting silently on the small table beside him. Day after day, he'd glance at it, hoping, wishing, just once, to see her name light up the screen. The silence wasn't just from the phone, it had seeped into his heart. His daughter Jessica hadn't spoken to him in years. And yet, every morning he brewed 2 cups of coffee out of habit. One for himself, and one for the daughter who never came. The seasons passed like stranger snow melting into spring. Spring fading into the heavy heat of summer, still no word. He replayed old memories to fill the emptiness. Jessica's laughter when she was little. The way she used to hug him around the waist, her tiny voice saying, "Daddy, don't ever leave me." But somewhere along the way she had left him. Then one evening, as the sun dipped low and the golden light spilled across his quiet home, the silence broke. The phone vibrated, a sound so alien after years that his heart nearly stopped. And when he saw the name on the screen, his breath caught in his throat. Jessica. He fumbled with the phone, his hands trembling. After all these years, she was finally reaching out. His chest swelled with hope, with relief, with the aching joy of a man who thought he had been forgotten. But behind Jessica's voice, sweet and careful on the other end of the line, lay something hidden. She wasn't calling because she missed him. She wasn't calling because she wanted to fix what was broken. She was calling because she knew. She knew her father was no longer the poor man struggling to make ends meet. She knew about his success. The comfortable life he had built for himself after years of sacrifice. Still, Richard didn't see it, not yet. All he heard was the voice he had longed for, the voice he had prayed to hear again. "Dad," she said softly, as if no time had passed at all. "I've missed you." His heart raced. Had she really come back to him? Was this finally the moment he had dreamed of, where the loneliness would end and they would be a family again? But what Richard didn't know was that the call carried a shadow. Every word, every pause, every gentle laugh was a disguise. She had her reasons, and they had nothing to do with love. Why had she cut ties all those years ago? What had changed now to make her return? And why now, at this moment, when her absence had already carved scars too deep to heal? The story of Richard and Jessica is not one of simple reunion. It is a story of bitter truths, hidden intentions, and a betrayal more painful than silence. Because Jessica had no idea that her timing was about to turn her world upside down, and what started as her plan to take advantage of her father's success would end in a way she could never imagine. So stay with me, because this is not just a story about money. It's about the price of broken trust, the weight of betrayal, and the lesson that comes when love is treated like a transaction. And before we dive deeper, let me say this. If you love stories of betrayal, revenge, and bitter truths, subscribe to Payback Stories. You won't want to miss what happens next. Richard was never a man of luxury. He was a man of sweat, grit, and long hours. In his 50s now, his back carried the weight of years spent in factories, dadded construction sites, and odd jobs no one else wanted. He was the kind of man who fixed what was broken, who made ends meet even when the ends refused to meet. His hands were calloused, his clothes plain, his life simple. But for him, there was always one thing that mattered more than anything else: his daughter, Jessica. After the divorce, when Jessica was only 7, Richard found himself alone with a responsibility far greater than any job he had ever done. Her mother had chosen another path, new relationships, new cities, a life without the burden of a child. Richard, however, stayed. He stayed even when money was short. He stayed even when exhaustion clawed at his bones. He stayed because Jessica was his reason to breathe. Life wasn't kind to him, but he did everything he could to make it kind to her. He worked double shifts, sometimes 3 in a row, just to cover her school fees. He skipped meals so she wouldn't have to. He patched up his old boots with tape, while making sure she always had decent shoes for school. And when she asked why he didn't eat with her sometimes, he'd smile and say he wasn't hungry, though his stomach told a different story. In his eyes, every sacrifice was worth it. Every bead of sweat, every ache in his muscles was an investment in her future. He dreamed of watching her graduate, cheering in the crowd as she held her diploma. Proof that his struggle had not been in vain, but Jessica's world looked very different from his. By the time she reached her teenage years, the drift had already begun. She saw the patched boots, the small lunches, the secondhand jacket sand. Instead of pride, she felt shame. She watched her classmates get dropped off in shiny cars, their parents dressed in tailored suits, and she compared them to her father, tired, grease-stained, and humble. Jessica was ambitious, no doubt. She wanted more from life. But along with ambition came materialism. Slowly, she began to hide parts of herself. She stopped inviting friends home. She avoided introducing her father at school events. To her, his love was unwavering, but in her eyes it was wrapped in poverty. And poverty was something she couldn't bear to be associated with. Richard noticed the changes. He noticed how she walked faster when he picked her up, as though trying to separate herself from him. He noticed how she stopped holding his hand in public. He noticed how her laughter with him was replaced by silence, and later by irritation. But he told himself it was just the teenage years. That one day she'd look back and realize everything he had done for her. One winter evening, he stood outside her school, bundled in his worn jacket, his breath fogging in the cold air. The streetlights flickered, and the wind bit through his gloves. He waited, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, a small smile on his face at the thought of walking her home. But then he saw her. Jessica, not walking toward him, but slipping into the back seat of a wealthy friend's car. She didn't look back. Not once. Richard stood there in the cold, the second cup of hot chocolate he had brought for her slowly losing its steam. The ache in his chest was colder than the night air. Moments like that became common. She avoided him at events, rolled her eyes at his questions, distanced herself at every turn. Richard tried harder, always tried harder, showing up for her plays, her sports games, clapping the loudest even when she pretended not to know him. His love never dimmed, even when hers seemed to flicker and fade. By the time she was 16, Jessica had surrounded herself with wealthy friends. Friends whose parents had vacation homes, who wore designer clothes, who made her feel like she belonged to a world that was far from her father's reality. She craved that world, even if it meant leaving him behind. Richard could feel her slipping away, like sand through his fingers, no matter how tightly he held on. Then came 18. The year she was legally an adult. The year she packed her bags and left. There was no big fight, no dramatic farewell, just a quiet departure. She said she wanted to chase her dreams, and he wanted her too. But he never imagined those dreams wouldn't include him. The phone stopped ringing. Holidays passed without her. Birthdays became just another day. She built her life far away, and in her story there was no place for her father. Richard kept waiting. He sent the occasional text. "Hope you're doing well, sweetheart." Sometimes he got a reply, most times he didn't. He convinced himself she was busy, that one day she'd call. That one day she'd realize everything he had sacrificed. That one day she'd come home. But the years dragged on and that day never came. His life went on in silence. Work, dinner alone, weekends staring at old photos, and then, on an ordinary evening when Richard had long stopped expecting, his phone buzzed. Her name appeared on the screen. Jessica. He froze, staring at it, his heart thundering in his chest. She was 25 now, a grown woman. Why was she calling after all these years? Was it love? Regret? Did she finally miss him? Richard answered the call with hope in his voice. But he had no idea that this call wasn't about love. It was about money, and Jessica had no idea. That calling now at this moment would change everything. The years had passed like whispers in the wind. The man who once wore worn-out boots and came home with aching hands now walked with a quiet confidence. His small construction business, which began with nothing more than a borrowed toolbox and a few loyal clients, had grown into something steady, respectable, and despicable. To the neighbors' eyes, successful, he still wasn't rich. Not in the way people bragged about, but for the first time in decades. He didn't have to check his bank account before buying groceries. He'd saved enough to buy himself a modest but beautiful home on the edge of town. A place where the grass stayed green and the paint on the walls wasn't peeling. The same man who once skipped meals to feed his daughter now had a refrigerator full of food. The same man who once came home bone-tired from double shifts now had the freedom to sit on his porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the birds sing. But as much as life had changed, one thing remained painfully the same. His phone never rang with her name, Jessica. It had been years since he heard her voice. Years since she slammed the door at 18, declaring she was tired of being poor, tired of being embarrassed by him, tired of living the life of a man who sacrificed everything for her. He thought of her every night, wondered where she was, wondered if she was safe. wondered if she ever thought of him even for a second. And then one ordinary Tuesday evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and his quiet house filled with shadows, his phone lit up. His heart almost stopped. The name on the screen made his hands tremble. Jessica. For a moment, he froze, staring at the letters, afraid that if he blinked it would vanish, that it was just some cruel dream. But it wasn't. His daughter was calling. After all these years, he pressed answer with a shaking finger. "Dad!" Her voice was soft, almost careful. His chest tightened. The sound of her voice felt like a piece of his broken heart clicking back into place. "Jessica." His own voice cracked, filled with a mix of disbelief and hope. There was a pause, then a sudden warmth in her tone. "Yeah, Dad, it's me. I've missed you." The words cut deep. He closed his eyes, savoring them, letting himself believe, if only for a moment, that his little girl was back. But as the minutes ticked by, the conversation began to shift. She told him about her life, how things had been hard lately. She slipped in the struggles: late rent, job troubles, bills piling up. Her voice carried just enough sorrow to sound convincing, but not enough to hide the agenda between the lines. He listened, nodding to himself, gripping the phone tighter. His heart warred against his mind. One part of him wanted to believe every word. To believe she came back because she missed him, because blood was stronger than pride. But deep down, another part whispered something else, something colder. She only called because she knows, he thought. Because now I have something to offer. She asked how he was doing. And when he mentioned the business, the modest home, the little victories he had built with sweat and perseverance, he caught the faintest shift in her tone. "That's amazing, Dad," she said, her voice lighting up. "I'm so proud of you." But he wondered, was it pride or was it calculation? Still, he wanted to believe. He wanted so badly to hold on to the dream that his daughter had come back because of love, not money. And then, as if testing the waters, she said softly, "You know, Dad, I hate asking, but I'm in a really tough spot right now. I don't know who else to turn to." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. His chest tightened again, this time not with hope but with dread. He swallowed hard, fighting to keep his voice steady. "What kind of tough spot, Jessica?" A small pause, a hesitant breath, and then it came. I need some help, Dad. Just for now. If you could lend me a little, I promise I'll pay you back." His hand clenched into a fist against his knee. His heart screamed for him to say yes, because that's what fathers do. But his mind whispered again, "She's not here for you. She's here for your money." Still, he stayed silent. He couldn't say no, not yet. Not when he finally heard her voice again after years of nothing. Jessica laughed nervously on the other end. "I mean, it's not much. Just enough to cover rent. You know how it is." He nodded slowly, though she couldn't see. "Yeah," he whispered, "I know how it is." But deep inside, a storm was brewing. He wanted to believe her love was real. He wanted to believe she missed him. But that whisper, that nagging voice, refused to leave. And as the call ended, as she promised to visit soon, he sat in his quiet living room. Staring at the darkened phone screen, the question echoed in his mind. Louder and louder. Was she really back for him? Or just for his money? At first, it felt like a dream. After years of silence, Jessica was back in his life. She visited him on weekends, sometimes during the week, always with a bright smile and warm hug. To the neighbors, it looked like a father-daughter bond had been rekindled. To him, it felt like a second chance, but slowly he began to notice the pattern. It started small. One evening, as they sat on the porch sipping iced tea, she tilted her head and sighed. "Dad, my phone's been acting up. I can't really keep up with work calls. Do you think maybe you could help me get a new one? Just this once." He didn't hesitate. "Of course, sweetheart." He went with her to the store the very next day. Watching her smile as she unboxed the shiny new phone filled him with pride. It was nothing compared to all the years he wished he could have given her more, but soon, the little favors became a routine. Her rent was late, he paid it. Her car broke down, he covered the repairs. She hinted at old college debts, credit cards piling up, he wrote the checks. And every time she would hug him tightly, kiss his cheek, and whisper, "Thank you. Dad, I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words warmed him, but only for a moment. Because each time he noticed something missing, she never asked about him. Never once did she wonder how his back was after years of heavy labor. Never asked if the business was tiring him out. Never asked if he was lonely in that quiet house where every room echoed. It was always about her. Her needs. Her struggles. Her desires, and with each favor, the requests grew larger. A new car. Help with moving into a bigger apartment. Money for clothes, for networking events, for trips she needed to take. It became less about survival and more about lifestyle. Designer bags. Fine dining. A world she had always craved, but could never afford until her father's modest success gave her an open door at first. He told himself it was okay. He had worked his whole life for her, hadn't he? If this was what it took to keep her in his life, then maybe it was worth it. But the doubts grew louder. One afternoon, as he came home early from the shop, he heard her voice in the living room. She was laughing on the phone, pacing back and forth with that brand new designer purse dangling from her arm. Yeah, girl, it's perfect timing, she said, her voice light and careless. My dad finally made it. He's got money now. I just ask and boom, done. New car, rent, whatever I want. Took him long enough, right? His chest tightened. He froze in the hallway, every word cutting deeper than the last. My dad finally made it. Now I get what I want. The laughter that followed didn't sound like the little girl he once carried on his shoulders. It sounded like a stranger. A stranger who saw him as nothing more than an ATM. He felt the weight of years crashing down on him. The skipped meals, the cold nights waiting for her after school, the aching hands that built a future brick by brick, all of it for her. And now, standing there in his own home, he realized the truth. To her, he wasn't a father. He was just a wallet. He stepped back quietly, his heart breaking in a way he had never known before. Worse than the nights she ignored him as a teenager. Worse than the years of silence, because this time, she was close but only for what he could give. Later that night, as the house grew quiet and Jessica scrolled on her phone in the guest room he had prepared for her, he sat alone at the kitchen table. The glow of the lamp cast long shadows across his weary face. His hands trembled not from age, but from anger, from betrayal, from the realization that he had been used by the very person he loved most. For years, he dreamed of hearing her call him dad again. And now, every time she said it, it felt hollow. He stared at the checkbook sitting in front of him. The pen beside it. The cycle of giving and giving and giving. And in that silence, something inside him shifted that night. It made a decision that would change everything. He didn't explode that night. He didn't storm into her room and demand answers. No, he was too wise for that now. Years of quiet suffering had taught him that patience was the sharpest weapon. So instead, he smiled. He played the role she wanted him to play. The generous father, the man who couldn't say no. Every time she asked for something, he nodded. Every time she flashed that practiced smile, he reached for his wallet. Outwardly, nothing changed, but secretly, everything had changed. He began to keep records. Every dollar she asked for, every car payment, every emergency. He kept receipts neatly folded in a small binder, each entry dated and signed. A careful list of avowedance of what she really saw him as. Weeks turned into months, and he let her dig herself deeper into her own greed. But in his heart, a plan was forming. One evening over dinner, he leaned across the table. Jessica, he said warmly, I've been thinking about expanding the shop. Business has been good and I could use some help managing things. You've always been so smart, so capable. What do you say? Why don't you come work with me? It could even be your future. For a moment, she froze. Then she laughed, waving her hand dismissively. Dad, come on! I'm not really. Cut out for all that. Managing inventory? Talking to customers? That's not my thing. I just want to live life, Travel, network, build connections. I don't want to be stuck behind a counter. He smiled gently as if her words didn't sting. Of course, he said, sipping his tea. Just thought I'd offer. But inside, her answer confirmed everything. She didn't want a future with him. She didn't want his business, his hard work, or his legacy. She wanted his money clean, fast, easy. Nothing more. That night after she left, he sat in his study and pulled out a document he had been thinking about for months. His will. Slowly, carefully, he rewrote it. Line by line, he removed her name. No more inheritance. No safety net. No free ride instead. His modest fortune would go where it was truly valued. A local charity he had supported for years. That gave scholarships to children with nothing but dreams. And to his loyal employees, the ones who had stood by him when he had nothing. They would inherit the shop, the savings, the future he had built with his own hands. It wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of justice. A father's way of ensuring his life's work meant something. Even if his own daughter chose to throw away her love for greed, but he didn't stop there. He wanted her to reveal her true self, not just to him, but to everyone. The next time Jessica came around, he hinted at a new idea. "I've been thinking about investing in a little side venture," he said casually. "Maybe real estate. I'd love for you to help me be part of it. What do you think?" Her eyes lit up, not with interest in helping, but with greed. "Real estate? That's big money, Dad. But what exactly would I need to do?" "Oh, nothing much," he said softly. "Just help me oversee the finances. Meet with a few people. Learn the ropes." Her smile faltered. She toyed with her fork, then shook her head. "I don't really have time for that, Dad. You know I'm busy with other things. But hey, if you need to transfer money for it, I can give you my account details. Make it easier." His heart sank, but his face never changed. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll figure it out." Inside, though, the plan was complete. She thought she had secured her future. That her father's wealth would always be there waiting for her. That she could dip into his love, his effort, his blood and sweat, whenever she pleased. But she had no idea what was coming, because the man she thought was blind to her betrayal had been watching all along, and this time, he wasn't going to let her win. Jessica's requests had been growing bolder with each visit. First, it was little things: an upgraded phone, a loan for rent, a quick transfer for shopping. But one evening, she sat across from her father with an expression he hadn't seen since she was a child, wide-eyed. "Almost innocent, Dad," she began. Her tone sugar-sweet. "I've got this amazing idea. A dream project. I want to start my own business, something huge. All I need is a little push, some capital. Maybe 50,000? The number hung in the air like a hammer blow. He sipped his tea slowly, hiding the storm rising inside. Then, calmly, he nodded. 50,000 is no small amount, Jessica. But I'll agree. On one condition." Eyes flickered with surprise. "Condition?" "Yes," he said evenly. "You'll come stay with me. Just for a month. Live here. Spend time with me. No rushing off. No excuses. If you can do that, I'll consider it." Her lips pressed together, her brow furrowed. But the thought of the money was too powerful. Finally, she forced a smile. "Of course, Dad, I'd love that." And so, she moved into his modest but comfortable home. For a moment, he allowed himself to hope. Perhaps this month would rekindle something between them. Maybe they would rediscover the bond they once had, but the reality was harsh. She avoided dinners, preferring to order takeout in her room. She scrolled endlessly on her phone while he tried to make conversation. She rolled her eyes at his simple habits, the way he made coffee the old-fashioned way. The small-town shows he liked on TV, the stories he told of his youth. One evening, he cooked her favorite childhood meal, spaghetti with homemade sauce. He set the table, poured the wine, and waited. She never showed. Instead, she texted him, busy with a call. "Eat without me." The plate of food sat untouched until it grew cold. Then came the breaking point. Late one night, as he passed by her room, he heard her laughter. Curious, he paused, and the words that followed pierced him like a knife. "Yeah, I just have to put up with him for now. Once he hands over the money, I'm out." Can you believe how easy this is? His chest tightened. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. His hands trembled as he leaned against the wall. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every missed meal he had endured for her, all reduced to this cruel charade. But he didn't step in. Not yet. Instead, he walked back to his room, sat on the edge of his bed, and stared at the darkness. The decision was no longer difficult. He knew exactly what had to be done. A week later, he invited his small circle of family and friends over for a gathering. Jessica, dressed elegantly, basked in the attention. She played the role of the doting daughter, smiling sweetly, holding his arm. To the guests, she looked like a caring young woman finally reconnecting with her father. But he knew the truth. When the meal was finished, He rose to his feet, clearing his throat. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I have something important to share. The room fell silent. Jessica looked at him curiously, then smiled, expecting perhaps an announcement about her dream project. Instead, he held up a folder, the revised will, for years. I've worked hard, and like any father, I wanted the best for my daughter. But recently, I've realized something painful. Love cannot be bought. And loyalty cannot be faked. He paused, glancing at Jessica. Her smile faltered just slightly. I've made changes to my estate. My home, my business, my savings, they will not go to Jessica. Instead, they will support the people and causes that truly matter. The employees who stood by me, and the children in this community who deserve a chance at life. Gasps filled the room. Jessica's face drained of color. He continued, voice steady. I do this not out of anger, but out of truth. I needed everyone to know the reality of where my trust belongs. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Jessica's sharp intake of breath. And in that moment, everyone saw it, the mask slipping, her eyes wide with shock, betrayal, and fear. The father lowered the folder onto the table, his expression calm, almost relieved. The truth always finds its way out, he said softly. The look on her face said it all. The silence after his announcement was deafening. Jessica's chair scraped against the floor as she shot to her feet, her voice trembling with fury. You can't be serious. After everything I've done for you, after finally coming back into your life? Her eyes darted around the room, searching for sympathy. But the faces staring back at her weren't buying it. They weren't fooled by her performance anymore. Everything you've done for me? Her father repeated quietly, his tone calm, almost sorrowful. Jessica, all you did was take. And when love was given freely, you ignored it. Her cheeks flushed red, her lips quivered, but the words she tried to muster fell flat. For the first time, the truth was undeniable, not just to her father, but to everyone in the room. Family members shook their heads. A cousin whispered under her breath, unbelievable. The loyal employees who had stood beside the father exchanged knowing glances. Jessica, the girl who once could twist perceptions with a smile, now stood exposed. Her anger quickly shifted to desperation. Dad, please, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't mean it like that. I was just lost. I still need you. Tears welled in her eyes, but her father didn't flinch. He had seen those tears before, and he now understood what they were. A tool, a performance, not a reflection of true remorse. Jessica, he said softly, but firmly, I loved you more than life itself. And I would have given you everything if only you had loved me, not my money. But you've made your choice. And tonight, I've made mine. Her shoulders slumped as if the ground had vanished beneath her. She realized, far too late, that she hadn't just lost access to his wealth. She had lost the one man who had always been there for her, even when she turned her back on him. And there was no undoing it. She stormed out of the room. Her heels echoing against the floor, leaving behind whispers and heavy silence. The father remained standing, shoulders straight, eyes steady. For the first time in decades, he felt free. Free from the chains of her conditional love. Free from the hope that had kept him waiting for a daughter who never truly returned. That night, after everyone had gone, he sat alone in his modest living room. The house was quiet but not heavy. There was peace in the air, a calm he hadn't felt in years. He poured himself a cup of tea, leaned back in his chair, and allowed the silence to embrace him. He wasn't surrounded by riches, nor by the daughter he once longed to hear from. But he was surrounded in spirit by truth, by loyalty, by the people who genuinely cared. The employees who respected him, the friends who admired him, the family members who saw him not as a wallet, but as a man who had endured and risen. And in that quiet moment, he smiled. For the first time in a long time. His heart wasn't heavy. The truth had cost him his daughter. But it had also given him freedom. He whispered to himself, love is priceless. And if it has a price, it was never love at all. The screen fades with his image. An older man sitting alone, but not lonely. A man who finally chose peace over pain, and then the narrator's voice asks the audience directly, what would you have done in his place? Forgive or walk away? Tell us in the comments, because your voice matters in stories like these. The pace of the story now slows, the tone turning softer, more reflective. The whirlwind of betrayal, heartbreak, and revelation fades into a quiet voice that speaks directly to the heart. What happened between this father and daughter wasn't just about money. It was about something far deeper, the fragile bond of trust. Once broken, no amount of apologies, no pile of riches can stitch it back together. Relationships built on greed always collapse. They may glitter for a while, they may even fool people into thinking they're strong, but eventually the cracks show. Because love cannot survive in the shadow of selfishness. The father's story reminds us of an often overlooked truth. A parent's love is not a bank account. It is not there to be withdrawn from only when it suits. It's a gift, given freely, meant to be cherished and reciprocated. When a child mistakes that love for a source of endless material gain, they don't just rob their parent of money. They rob themselves of something far greater. Think about it. Money can buy cars, phones, clothes, dinners, and fancy restaurants. But it cannot buy forgiveness. It cannot buy back lost years. It cannot erase the ache of an unanswered call or the silence of a child who never visits. The daughter in this story learned that lesson too late. She thought wealth would secure her future, but in chasing fortune, she lost the very foundation of her past, her father's unconditional love, and that is the bitter truth. Once trust is gone, even fortune cannot buy it back. So let this story be a reminder to us all. Never wait until success to value someone. Don't only return to your parents, your family, or your friends when life is easy or when their pockets are full. Because when people realize they're loved only for what they can give, not for who they are, they close their hearts forever. True relationships thrive not in the glow of wealth, but in the shadows of struggle. The father who gave up meals so his daughter could eat. The friend who stands by you when you have nothing. The partner who chooses you even when life is hard. These are the people who define real love. And if you forget that, life has a way of teaching you. Sometimes painfully, the father's peace at the end wasn't found in revenge. It was found in acceptance. Acceptance that his love deserved better, that his sacrifices deserved respect, and that his heart deserved freedom from manipulation. That is the real victory, not just proving her wrong, but proving to himself that he deserved more. The camera fades to him one last time, sitting quietly, content, not bitter but wiser. His story is heavy, yes, but it carries a lesson worth remembering. Don't wait until success to value someone. Because once trust is broken, even fortune can't buy it back. And as the narrator's voice gently fades, the closing words invite the audience in. Thank you for watching. If you believe in lessons from betrayal and bittersweet revenge, subscribe to Payback Stories and never miss the next twist.